All right, so genes. What are genes? Genes are the sequence of DNA, A, T, C's, and G's that code for a specific protein. And the kind of textbook definition of what a gene is a unit of heredity, okay? And genes are found at particular locations on a chromosome, and that location is known as a locus. Now, what's cool is here's a set of homologous chromosomes. At this locus is a chromosome or is a gene. Let's say it's a gene for eye color. Let's just be easy here. The same gene will be found right here on the other homologous chromosome. So if this one came from mom and this one came from dad or whatever, those are the same genes. Now they may not be the exact versions of that gene. This one might be for blue eyes and this one might be for brown eyes. As you may remember from previous courses, those are known as alleles, different versions of a gene. We'll get more to that later. But we have the same gene. They're eye color gene, but they may be different eye colors. Okay, so those are found on our chromosomes. So we need to get those divided out just right so that when we make a sperm or egg and we make a new organism, they end up in the right proportions in that new organism. Now, 22 pair of your chromosomes are autosomes. I've used this word once already. Those are your typical chromosomes. And there's one pair of sex chromosomes. Females have well, I'm going to say typically, there are always variations to this. Females typically have a homologous pair of X chromosomes, XX. Males typically have XY. So we have, here's a female, XX. They have the same two chromosomes. Males have an X and a Y, Y being much smaller. Okay. Now, when I say typically, that's because sometimes things go a little wrong and we end up with someone with XXX, or we end up with men with XXY. Things like that can happen as well. Now, let's look at a cell. We're not going to draw a human cell here because human cells are 2N. He's 46, and that'd be a pain to draw. Oops, I just drew a line on my screen. Oh well. All right, 2N of 46. So we're going to draw a cell that's 2N of 6. 2N of 6. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And notice they're going to start color coding the chromosomes here. Red chromosomes stand for maternal chromosomes, those that were inherited from mom. Blue represents paternal chromosomes, those that were inherited from dad. So there's 3 maternal chromosomes and there's 3 paternal chromosomes. Each one has a partner. I like to think of it as like a dancing partner. They each have a homologous partner. So let's look at all the terminology here. Here we have sister chromatids. You know that one. That's a duplicated chromosome. So you had one chromatid that duplicated during S phase, and now it's 2. Here we have, of course, a centromere. You know that word. Now this is kind of covered up by my video. This is a pair of homologous chromosomes. Homologous chromosomes. Now, one other interesting term that we need to know is this chromatid here and this one here are non-sister chromatids in a homologous pair. So they're non-sister chromatids found on different homologous chromosomes. So they're homologous partner, basically. That's important because between non-sister chromatids in a homologous pair is where crossing over will occur later on. So let's look at overall a cartoon here of meiosis for you. Here we have dad and here we have mom. Dad is diploid, 2N. Mom is diploid, 2N. So there's 1, 2 of every chromosome in each of their somatic cells. But dad makes a gamete, and he does that via meiosis. So one of these 2 chromosomes ends up in that sperm. One of these 2 cells, or one of these 2 chromosomes here, ends up in mom's egg. The sperm and egg fuse together, and we end up at a diploid organism again. So here, this is haploid. This is just N, right? Haploid, or 1N. You can write it 1N or N. It's the same thing mathematically. But now we're back to 2N, 2 copies. So you got So this individual got one from mom and one from dad. Now when this individual goes off, so we talk about maternal and paternal chromosomes. She got this one from dad, she got this one from mom. This is paternal chromosome, this is a maternal chromosome. When she goes now to make an egg, in this case, one of those two is going to end up in an egg, because meiosis only lets one of each pair of homologous chromosomes into a gamete. And so we're back to an N down here when we make an egg. So she inherited these from mom and dad, then she passes one or the other off to the next generation. Now, which parent is responsible for the sex of a child? Remember, females are XX, males are XY. So if mom can only give an X down here, right? But dad can give an X or a Y. So it's dad who determines whether or not an individual has two X's or an X and a Y. Now she, in this case, inherited two X's. She got an X from dad and an X from mom, and one of those X's could be passed off. She could pass off the X from dad to the next generation, or she could pass on the X she got from mom to the next generation. Now this is the basic human life cycle. I'm going to end with this slide. Well, I'll do a couple more slides, I guess, because this video is not too long yet. Here are two human beings. They are diploid, 2N of 46. They have structures called ovaries and testes, right? These are the gonads. That's where meiosis happens in a human being, in the gonads, in the ovaries or testes. Meiosis takes place, so there's diploid cells in here, but they undergo meiosis and they produce haploid cells, N of 23. Eggs are made and sperm are made. Fertilization takes place when sperm and egg fuse, the nuclei fuse, and you end up with a zygote, which is diploid, back to 2N of 46. As soon as this divides one time by mitosis, it's called an embryo. Okay, so as soon as it divides, it's an embryo. But a fertilized egg is called a zygote. It develops back into a human being. Now, what's interesting here, here's where we'll end this video for now. Males produce hundreds of millions of sperm a day, from puberty till death. Lots of meiosis. A sperm takes 7 weeks from start to finish. Females are much more complicated in the human species. Female egg production starts let's say you are a female. I'm sure at least half of you are, probably more than half of you are in my class. So when you're producing eggs, it started before you were born. You were an embryo when you started making an egg. Okay? So one of my students brought this up, and it's kind of interesting to think about. The egg that made you was in your mom when your mom was in your grandma. Crazy. Okay. Female egg production starts as an embryo, but stops at prophase 1, which we'll learn about in a minute. So you start making eggs when you're in the womb. When you're born, you have 1 to 2 million primary oocytes, which are these little cells that are going to divide one day to make eggs. Not all of them, of course. About 500 in an average lifetime. Between puberty and menopause will mature. Now, each month, I'm sorry my video is covering this up, but I will post the PowerPoints as well. Each month, one of those oocytes completes meiosis 1. Meiosis is divided into two phases, meiosis 1 and 2. Meiosis 2 only happens if a sperm penetrates the egg. In men, it's just boom, 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 boom. But in females, you start when you're in the womb. Then each month, one of them continues a little ways and stops. And then it only finishes if an egg fertilizes or penetrates that egg, and then it continues to divide, and then egg nucleus and sperm nucleus fuse, and you get a zygote. All right, we're going to pick up from there next time. Here's an image showing this, just so you can see what happens in females. I may come back to this image later on to explain it after we've talked about the stages of mitosis.